channel. My name is Adam. This is Vancity Audi, and in today's video, we're tossing on some Black Forest Industry engine mounts, as well as a transmission insert. These have black poly because they're stage 1. This is my daily driver. I'm not going too extreme with this. I need to use it day in and day out to get to work, so I don't want the car to be as stiff and have a ton of NVH like I do in my RS3, in which I use Black Forest Industries stage 2 mounts. For those of you that aren't in the know, NVH stands for noise, vibration, and harshness. And this is definitely going to stiffen up the car, but it's also going to add performance. It's going to prevent some of that slop. It's going to prevent some of that drivetrain movement, as well as the engine from shifting all over the place while I'm drag racing. So today in this video, we're going to install this. We're going to toss it in. We're going to get a lot of the action from underneath the car because that's where the mounts are. They're tucked deep down on the sides of the engines in this B8S4, and I'll get to a review video in the following video once I've had some time to see what they really feel like on the road. Let's get to the install. This was a really late night for Kyle and I, and it's been some time since we did the install, so please forgive me if this install guide is not perfect. Hopefully it can help some of you, and I will do my best to walk you guys through it. The first thing Kyle has to do is actually support the motor from above, because we dropped the entire subframe to do this engine mount swap to be able to get at them from the sides. So the first thing he takes off are these plastic doohickeys. We don't know what they're called, but it was the first thing we needed to remove. The next thing was we had to undo everything on the fender liner, because as you can see, he actually had to peel those back to get to everything underneath. The next thing he does is he breaks loose those engine mount bolts, because we need to be able to drop the subframe, and that is still held together with those engine mounts being bolted on. He actually undoes the brace that connects to the rad support. Then I think what he's doing there is he's loosening the steering rack. Next thing he does is he removes all of the subframe bolts. With the subframe dropped, you can easily see the engine mount from the passenger side. This is the front on the passenger side. He then needs to remove the 4 bolts on the front of the subframe. Once that's done, he actually removes this piece of metal that was holding on to the OEM cable that connects to the engine mount. As you guys can see, that is one ugly looking OEM mount. This is now the driver's side mount. We actually had to undo the steering rack to be able to drop the subframe even lower. These heat shields were getting in our way because they were still supporting the subframe, and we needed to get it even lower than we had it originally. The driver's side mount was much more difficult to remove. He had to disconnect the level sensor because that was actually supporting it as well, and we needed as much leeway as we could get. He then removes the heat shield on the driver's side engine mount and then manages to wiggle and jimmy it out of the front. Here they are, completely removed from the car, and what do we see? Both of the OEM mounts are actually torn. You can see both of them. The driver side is actually worse than the passenger side. These things look like they've seen better days, so I am very, very happy that we went and got these BFI mounts to upgrade them. Something also that I noticed is in these B8s, these actually have a plug, and Kyle has told me that these plug into the car, and when you accelerate aggressively, these will actually tighten up, so you get better performance. What we see now in the Black Forest Industries stage 1 mounts is there are no plugs. So I'm very interested to see what we see for codes when we get these installed and the car started up again. And I put the little transmission insert there so you can see them all nice and neat for the last time before we throw them in the car. But there again, look at these things just beaten up. At the time of this install, my car had 116,000 kilometers. So if you have more kilometers or miles on your car than that, I can only imagine the type of condition these things are in. We snuck the driver side engine mount through the rear above the subframe. We had to maneuver some stuff around to be able to get that heat shield around the engine mount and in just the right spot to feed those bolts through it. Here I'm showing you exactly where the bolts go through on the subframe to go into the engine mount. This is the passenger side, which was way easier. You can see it's an easy push right through the front of the subframe as we put that cover over top and then we slide the bolts through the subframe through the engine mount. Then we put the 4 bolts back into the front of the subframe that we removed. We torque the bolts that we put through the subframe into the engine mounts at 55 Newton meters. For the 4 bolts on the front of the subframe, we torque those to 20 Newton meters. Now he connects the subframe back to the body of the car with loosely putting the bolts back in. What he's doing here is he's reaching through and reconnecting a line that he actually disconnected when we disconnected the steering rack. We've now put an actual support underneath the entire subframe so we can push the subframe up so it can connect back to the body. Here he is reconnecting all of the subframe bolts. We then need to torque all of those subframe bolts to 115 Newton meters plus an additional 90 degrees. While he's torquing these subframe bolts, he's doing so in a crisscross pattern, working your way inside out. He reconnects the level sensor. And then here I'm showing you where we ended up putting the little cables that used to connect to the OEM mounts. Now that they don't plug into anything, we wanted to make sure that they were facing forward so they were easily accessible if we needed to get to them in the future. Next, he tightened the shaft to the steering rack. He put blue Loctite on it and then put it to 30 Newton meters plus 90 degrees. Then he asked to reconnect the heat shields that we took the bolt out of to make sure that the subframe could drop enough. Now what he's doing is he's reconnecting the braces that connect to the rad support. Once you have those braces to the rad support tightened on both the driver and the passenger side, it allows you to put the bolt through the actual engine mount into the engine on the passenger side, as you can see here. What we couldn't do is do it on the driver side as well until we let the engine back down. So we removed the support from above, and then we were able to get that bolt in, which we torqued to 90 Newton meters plus 90 degrees. We then actually zap strapped those cables that used to run to the OEM engine mounts to the subframe, pointing out for easy accessibility to keep them out of the way in case we needed them. Now for those doohickeys to go back on, which we don't know the name of. Once those were installed on both sides, we were able to tighten up the fender liner and get it all screwed back into the appropriate position. We're all buttoned up down here. Everything is locked down in the way it should be. Just wanted to show you guys what the final product looks like. You can peek through the little hole there and see what that engine mount looks like now that it's all connected. One on the driver's side, not so much. It's really buried behind the oil cooler up underneath that heat shield. But we're all done this portion. Engine mounts are done. Time to get on to that transmission insert. Time for this fancy dancy transmission insert. As you can see, the poly is actually green on this. The durometer of this poly is actually 85 compared to the 70 for the black engine mounts. The different poly colors represent how stiff they are. And this is where the transmission insert is going. So I'll let Kyle get to his handiwork and we'll get this installed. For the transmission insert, it actually came with these two Torx bolts, even though in the instructions it said it was going to come with hex bolts. So we ended up just using the OEM bolts because they fit that much better. They actually went right into the recessed holes on the mount itself. There's the full install of the engine mounts, the Stage 1 engine mounts from Black Forest Industries, as well as their transmission insert in my B8S4. I hope this helps any of you that are looking at purchasing the product to be able to do this install a bit easier. We did this just from what we know about the car. No research done. This was the easiest way we found to do it without having to remove that oil cooler, without having to remove the air conditioning unit and all that jazz. So the subframe dropped was what we found to be the easiest method. Put it all back together, and now I get to experience what these mounts are all about. We'll see just how much additional NVH has been created from the use of all these mounts, and more importantly, how much crisper the shifts are, how much more efficiently it launches off the line without that slop, without the engine moving all over the place. I'm really pumped to see how these things drive. So stay tuned for a future video where I actually do a review of these mounts and how they feel on the road once I have a little bit of seat time and have put some miles on them. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, guys, take care.